Welcome to True Drew Podcast, your source for all things Nancy Drew. I'm your host, Avery, and on this podcast, we'll discuss everything from the Nancy Drew books, to computer games, to movie adaptations, and TV shows. Nothing is off the table. So if you're a True Drew, you'll definitely want to tune in for this podcast. Hello, True Drews, and welcome to the 40th episode of the podcast. If you've been with me this long, I just want to say thank you so much for listening, and I hope you're excited because on today's episode, we're going to be discussing the HerInteractive computer game, Stay Tuned for Danger. So, a few quick facts about this game before I jump into discussing my memories of Stay Tuned for Danger. This game first released in 1999, and it is actually based on a book from the Nancy Drew Files series by the same name, Stay Tuned for Danger, and that book came out in 1987. It is so cool to me that there are so many of the earlier classic Nancy Drew games that are based off of some of the Nancy Drew Files. I mean, we have Secrets Can Kill, Stay Tuned for Danger, Final Scene. So I'm really excited to get to reading these books later on in the podcast because if they're anything like the games, they're going to be amazing books. So first off, some of my memories when it comes to Stay Tuned for Danger. So I actually played Message in a Haunted Mansion first. That was the first game that I was introduced to. And then I can't remember if it was Secrets Can Kill, the original, or Stay Tuned for Danger that I did next. Those two were pretty much back to back. But I do remember coming from Message in a Haunted Mansion to Secrets Can Kill, I was like, whoa, what is going on with these graphics? But yeah, I cannot remember which one of those I played first, but Stay Tuned for Danger was such a good game and such a scary game. I mean, Rick Arlen is getting death threats. This is pretty extreme. I mean, we dealt with a murder in Secrets Can Kill, and then of course the hauntings and Message in a Haunted Mansion, which we'll talk about that next game episode that I do. But this was, I remember being like, wow, okay, there's high stakes. This guy is getting poisoned chocolate sent to him, broken clocks, this is some scary stuff. I don't know. I like the games where Nancy is trying to find a treasure. That's really cool. But I don't know. Something about when someone is getting death threats or has been murdered, I'm just like, oh, this hits the sweet spot for me. And we also get to poke around on a TV set. So, I mean, that's pretty amazing in and of itself. But yeah, some of the aesthetics of this game, the music, the locations you get to go to, it's just, it's one of my favorites. So before I jump into the list of characters in this game and do some impressions, because that's just fun to do, I wanted to give a quick shout out to Sarah Namath. I hope I'm saying your last name right, but she single-handedly over Facebook Messenger one night, it took 4 hours, she helped me get Stay Tuned for Danger installed on my Windows 11 computer. So Sarah, I just want to say thank you so much, because without you, I wouldn't have been able to play this game again, and I hadn't played it in 10 plus years, so thank you so much. See, this is what I love so much about the Nancy Drew game and book community. All of you all are so nice. I'm constantly, messaging you guys on Instagram or on these Facebook pages, and just everybody is so amazing. So I just love being a part of this community. Oh yeah, and before we jump into these characters, something that I didn't do for Secret of the Old Clock, but I wanted to start doing, and I did last game episode, we'll just discuss the overall game cover really quick, because I like to do that for the books. I figured why not do that for the games. But the Stay Tuned for Danger game cover is very pinkish red, and we've got, these studio exec chairs and the little clipboard, the one that you click and it's action. And you've got this set, and you can see one of the cameras, and there's this shadowy figure standing in the doorway. And as a kid, I was always like, ugh, it's so creepy. This must be the person that's threatening Rick Arlen. But such a cool cover, and I would say I would probably give this a 3 magnifying glass rating. Okay, now on to our list of characters for Stay Tuned for Danger, which I should mention this is the second game in the HerInteractive series. But we, of course, have Nancy Drew. And we have Rick Arlen, who is this soap opera star who is getting death threats. There is Maddie Jensen, who is his co-star on this soap opera, Light of Our Love. And they have some romantic history, which we'll get into. Then there is Lillian Weiss, who is one of the directors of the show. She's got a real attitude. And Dwayne Powers, who is Maddie's agent and actually used to be Rick's agent as well. And then we have William Pappas, who is another director. We have Millie Strathorn, who is like the CEO exec over WWB Studios. And Ralph Guardino, who is the guy who checks you in the lobby when you first get to the studio. And then the mysterious character of Owen Spader, who we find out more about later. Okay, so now I'm going to give it a go and try my best at some of these character impressions. So first up, we have Rick Arlen himself. Entrez-vous, stay beautiful. Rick Arlen is like the most ridiculous and cheesiest character ever. Maddie Jensen. Welcome to New York, Nancy. I'm so glad you could come out here on such short notice. Lillian Weiss. Do I look like a tour guide? Bye-bye. Lillian. She's so beautiful, yet so hateful. Dwayne Powers. Come in. You see, Rick foolishly believes that acting is a status symbol, not an art form. See, like when I first played this game, I thought that Dwayne was going to be like this shy, meek person because of his little come in. And then he turns out to be the most like hateful person, like even more hateful than Lillian. Millie Strathorn. It's open! Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to go unpowder my nose. Ralph Guardino, the security guard. You'll need to come to this desk and sign in every time you enter so I can log you in. William Pappas. I don't care who he is. Nobody breaks a contract with William Pappas. And of course, Owen Spader has no lines in this game. So now on to the real voice actors in this game. So we of course have Lonnie Manila reprising her role as Nancy. We have Ryan Drummond is the voice of Rick Arlen. Mariah Angeline voices Maddie Jensen. Gerald Fontaine voices Lillian Weiss. Bob Heath actually voices Dwayne Powers and Ralph Guardino. Millie Strathorn is voiced by Lonnie Manila too. Oh, I did not know that. Wow. So she voiced Nancy and Millie. Okay, I could totally see that now. Then it looks like William Pappas was voiced by Frank Martin. And then we also have a few phone characters in this game. Ned is voiced by Ryan Campbell. Bess is voiced by Katie Denny. And George is voiced by Lindsay Newman. So really quickly, I'm going to read a game synopsis for Stay Tuned for Danger. And also, at this point, just so you know, spoiler alert, there's going to be a lot of spoilers for this game. For any game episodes, really. We'll discuss the culprit and we'll discuss some of the key points in the game. So if you don't want this game spoiled, I would stop listening now. Nancy is called to New York to help Maddie Jensen, the star of the soap opera Light of Our Love, solve the mystery of who is sending her coworker Rick Arlen death threats. Poison chocolates, ransom-style notes, and even a bomb. It's up to you as Nancy Drew to solve the case. So I always love to discuss the Easter eggs that are in some of these games. Pretty much every Nancy Drew game has some form of an Easter egg. So in this game, if you call 555 Jake, which is the Easter egg from Secrets Can Kill, the game before this, you get a cute sound effect. Or some people have apparently reported that it teleports you to Lillian's office, which is crazy. I actually tried that this time around, replaying it, and it was so cool. Another thing that I really like about the Nancy Drew games is there's so many allusions to real life or even the other Nancy Drew games. And so there's several HerInteractive references in this game. There's a business card and there's a mug that have the HerInteractive logo on it. They did this a lot in the earlier, first 4 or 5 games. And the business card also says Miss Terry Mystery. Get it? I love a good pun. This was a neat little allusion to another game. Also, there's apparently a file in Millie's trash can on her computer, and it mentions Blackmore Manor. And there's also a letter that mentions some of the Nancy Drew books. I just love that HerInteractive thought to do this and throw these little references in the games because it makes the universe seem so much more real. Now, this next section of the podcast, I don't believe I did this on the last 2 game episodes, so I apologize. I was like, I need to do these. I don't know why I didn't think of this beforehand, but we're going to talk about all of the second chances / the ways you can die in Stay Tuned for Danger. So this first one's pretty obvious, but you can get blown up by the bomb in Rick's dressing room if you don't solve it quickly enough. You can get strangled by the villain at the end of the game. You can lose the game but not die if Nancy pulls the fire alarm or gets caught in the studio after hours. And this goes without saying, but if you forget the wire cutters or the prop room doorknob, it's over. Your game is so screwed up. And I remember doing this as a kid, and I was like, you mean to tell me that I have to start this over entirely? I was like, oh, I was so mad. This was before Game Boomers was a thing. I didn't realize like there was a whole forum where you could get hints. So that has saved my life so many times since then. So I took down several notes for Stay Tuned for Danger while I was playing the game, and I just think it's fun to do this like I do for the books, so we'll go ahead and jump into the things that stuck out to me the most. So I don't think I realized this as a kid, but after starting the game and like Nancy reads the letter at the beginning, which can we talk about like how amazing that was in some of the earlier games? I can't remember which game it actually stops in, but we get Nancy reading a letter in the beginning to Hannah or her dad, and then it's tied up at the end of the game with another letter. That was so nice. I missed that. But in Nancy reading that letter, I picked up on the fact that Maddie is renting Aunt Eloise's apartment in New York. So it's not actually her apartment. And I was like, wow, she's brought a lot of pictures of herself just to be renting this apartment, but okay. So my next note says, Nancy calls Rick daytime's cutest hunk, and she's, of course, I think telling this to Bess, but I thought this was hilarious because, well, let's just go ahead and talk about it right now. So Nancy is 18 in the books and in the games. She's always 18. And Rick, from my understanding, is in his late 20s or early 30s. I mean, he looks a lot older. He's dating Maddie, and she's presumably around the same age as him. But he is so flirtatious. And as a kid, like, it kind of just went over my head. I really didn't pay attention to it, or I'd be like, okay, this guy's weird. But as an adult, I'm like, this is not okay. So actually, if you follow me on my Instagram, which is True Drew Podcast, I actually made a reel leading up to this episode because I thought it was hilarious. And I just made it kind of about how, as a kid, you don't realize how big of an age gap there is between Nancy and Rick, and then some of these other times in the books or in other games, and then as an adult, how it just totally grosses you out. I mean, Nancy can take care of herself, but it is a little bit problematic to me. I just think, like, this is just, this shouldn't be happening, like, this often. So another note that I took down is that this game also has Junior, Senior, and Master Detective, a lot like Secrets Can Kill. And every game after this is just Junior and Senior Detective. I don't know about you guys, but I like to play on Junior Detective because some puzzles are too crazy, and I also like to have a task list. So we get to talk to Maddie first thing when we get to her apartment in New York, or should I say Aunt Eloise's apartment, and Maddie says they were rehearsing, and her next lines on the teleprompter suddenly read, "You're going to die, Rick." Like, does that not give you chills? It's so creepy. I just love mysteries like this. It's so, So the next note that I took down is the pictures and magazines in this game are so 90s. HerInteractive loved to superimpose the characters' heads on real people's bodies. So you'll have like what looks like people at a 90s barbecue or cookout, and then you've got like Maddie and Rick's heads like just copy and pasted on top, and it's the funniest thing. It's just, I'm just like, whose bodies do these belong to? I actually love it though, and I love some of the like glitchy graphics because it just brings me back to my childhood. And it's funny because some of these pictures they use of people's actual bodies, like I could go to my house and look through like some of my parents' old photo albums, and like people dress like this. It was very just 90s floral shorts, like high-waisted shorts, and just like acid wash jeans, and it's so amazing. I also said it's fun snooping around in Maddie's apartment. The sunshine makes it seem like such a cozy place, and there are so many neat things to look at, like pictures and a note from Maddie's mom. This note actually had me suspecting Maddie's mom because she was just really mad and was writing about how she paid for Maddie's acting lessons and she deserved to be a bigger star than Rick. And at first I was like, is Maddie Jensen's mom behind all of this? But, the further you get into the mystery, the more you realize that's not possible. But it's also creepy while you're in Maddie's apartment. If you click on this calendar on Maddie's desk, you see Maddie's eye, which as a kid, this made me think that she was spying on us and was standing like right behind us. So I would like turn around real fast and nobody would be there. Spooky. Okay, so the next note that I have down is the taxi drivers' voices. What the heck? So the people, I don't know who was doing the voices for these taxi drivers. I couldn't find it anywhere on IMDb, but they were just giving the most. Because you have this one guy who's like, "Where to, lady?" And then there's a woman taxi driver that says, "Yeah, what's the address?" And then the third taxi driver that you would get sometimes, I guess he's supposed to have a New York accent, but he was like, "Where can I take you today, miss?" I don't know who voiced these taxi drivers, but bravo. Sometimes the background characters or supporting characters are just the most interesting. They just add another whole layer to the game, So when we go to WWB, the studio where Maddie and Rick and everyone works, you can see where there's letters that have been cut out of the magazines in the lobby. And there's been all these ransom type notes that Rick has been receiving. So I was just like, are we supposed to just believe that the criminal just sat out here in the lobby and just went to town with a pair of scissors? I mean, I think that's a bit obvious. I think they probably took them with them and did it in private, but yeah. I don't know, I may be in the minority here, but I love a good ransom note. Not like in real life, but like in a game or a fictional mystery. It's just, it adds a little spice. So the next note that I have down is the lobby music at the studio is bumping. I was like, it's very chill. It's like elevator music. And I have to play some for you right now. I have to sample it so you know what I'm talking about. Like, is that not the best 90s hold music you've ever heard? Your call is very important to us. We will answer your call in the order that it was received. So we get to snoop around Maddie's dressing room, and I think that's so fun, but there's a note that we get to piece together, and we start to figure out that Maddie and Rick had a thing and were in a relationship, and there's also a bit of a love triangle going on in this game. So Maddie likes Rick still, even though they're broken up, and Dwayne kind of has a thing for Maddie, but he's also her agent, so there's a conflict of interest there, but it just adds some more cool things to this game. So at this point in the game, we get to watch a scene of Light of Our Love, the soap opera that Rick and Maddie are in, and Rick gives like the most during this scene. And Maddie is like professing her love for him, or her character is. And Rick's just like, "I don't want to see you, Serena." And he like delivers it in a monotone twice. I mean, I kind of have to agree with Dwayne on this one. Rick is not that great of an actor. I mean, he shows more passion when he almost gets hit in the head with his Klieg light. Also, the character that Rick's portraying is named Rory Danner, and he apparently has an evil twin named Yuri, because it's a soap opera, so there's always an evil twin. And Maddie plays Serena Livingston. So we as Nancy witness this Klieg light almost falling on Rick's head and killing him, and so the set breaks up and everybody goes and takes 5, and so Nancy is able to investigate the set, and we see that there's another threat on the teleprompter about Rick's career and life ending. And it's after this happens that we get to meet Rick himself, and I said he's just super full of himself and hits on Nancy. He starts telling her, like, "You stay beautiful," and just all this stuff, and he is looking at himself in the mirror and smoothing his hair. I was just like, he thinks he's Rico Suave, which I think that's what Ned calls him in one of the phone calls that he and Nancy have. But the cool thing is, after Rick and his slimy self leave, we get to investigate his dressing room, and we see all of these death threats, and there's chocolates that say "Die Rick," there's some dead flowers, a broken watch that says like "Time's running out." It's very intense. I kind of like when the villains are super poetic or super just over the top. Like, we're dealing with someone who is blurring the edges of reality, and that is very scary. So next we get to meet Millie Strathoorn, the eccentric CEO of WWB, and she basically tells us to leave. She's like, no one is allowed in the prop room unless they're allowed in the prop room. So later we get to go in the prop room, but for now she's just like, get out of here. I do like Millie, though. She's just like such an oddball. Now, this next part I thought was like the end of the game. I thought I had messed everything up and I wouldn't be able to solve the game, because if you go and knock on Lillian's door, she is such a jerk. She will take your press pass, and I was like, oh no, I'm never going to get to solve this mystery, but Maddie gets us back on set. Yeah, but Lillian is just the worst. Like, her lipstick and hair game is on point, but she's a horrible person. The next note that I took down is Ned sounds really different in this game. So I think Scott Carty is the one that voices Ned for the majority of the games, but this Ned in Stay Tuned for Danger sounds quite different. I like both. I like both voices, but it's just interesting to play the newer games and then go back and play the older games. So anyways, Maddie helps us get back on set as an extra, and we have to go see Dwayne about getting another press pass, and we have to push the button and he yells at us to go away, so we have to figure out another way to get in. But his office is literally like, turn right at the mop bucket at the bottom of this seedy staircase and go down the hallway with the fluorescent lights that are twitching. Like, it seems like such a creepy place to have an office. But Dwayne just really does not like Rick, and you get that impression right off the bat. It also doesn't help that once Rick became really famous, he dumped Dwayne as his agent, so Dwayne has an axe to grind. But he does get us a press pass and helps us get back on the set, so that's all that matters. So another thing that I took note of is that in this game you get to switch between day and night, which isn't always the case in all of the games, but I actually really like this because you feel like you get more accomplished, you feel like you can see the different atmospheres at different times, and I just think that's really cool. So we go back to Millie Strathoorn in the props department, and she's full of riddles. She gives you these riddles like, give it air and it will live, give it water and it will die, and it's fire is the answer. There's several riddles, but if you answer them correctly, you get to hang out in the props department, and you can steal one of the doorknobs so you can get back in there, and you just find a lot of cool stuff in there. We also get to see that there's a typewriter in there that drops its Y, like in some of the notes that Rick has been getting. And then we get to see that there's a wig and some pieces of costuming that have gone missing, which plays in later. We find out that Owen Spader has been using these things, and it's not really Owen Spader. We'll get to that in a second, though. So the WWB studio, when you go there at night, this was so creepy to me as a kid because I knew, like, I wasn't supposed to be there. I was there after hours, and I was so sure that I was going to get caught. And I actually did get caught by Ralph Gardino sometimes. Like, if you stand in the hallway too long, like, he'll come and get you, which is so scary and stressful. But not as stressful as disarming the bomb in Rick's dressing room. So you go in there at this point later in the game, and you see this tape recorder, and it's got this distorted voice, and it's like, hello, Rick. There's a bomb in the room. I can't remember exactly word for word what it says, but it's just like taunting you. And you see like this stuff written in lipstick on the mirror. It's so creepy. But you have to use the wire cutters at this point in the game. And if you don't have the wire cutters at this point in the game, you may as well just start over, and it's awful. I did this to myself once as a kid, and I was like, dang it. But yeah, disarming this bomb, it was just so stressful. So Hannah sends us a tape with an interview from Rick, and I almost didn't see this as a kid because it was sitting in a chair at the lower part of your screen, so sometimes you could miss it, but you watch it for clues. You don't really find any, but it is funny to watch. But then also Nancy gets a box on that same chair with a threatening note and an alarm clock that goes off and says that time is up. It's so creepy. But it's at this point in the game when we go back to the studio and Nancy confronts Lillian, and she can accuse her of being the villain or accuse anybody else in the game. But Lillian says that she's been getting threatening notes too. And you then get the grand reveal of who the actual villain is. And it's Dwayne Powers. And my next note just says, Dwayne Powers made an excellent villain. The speech he gives, he was so scary. He's up in the sound booth and he then tries to kill Lillian, and as Nancy, you're supposed to go over and do this door lock, and if you don't do it in time, he will literally strangle you. Okay, so let's talk about Owen Spader real quick. So Dwayne was actually dressing up as Owen Spader. That is the reason why clothes were going missing from the props department, and Dwayne was able to easily make himself a badge and seem legit and come onto the set. But it is so funny to me when you see the security footage and you see Owen Spader / Dwayne Powers, and he's just creeping around in WWB studios after hours, and it's like creeping like a cartoon character, you know what I mean? But yes, that is who Owen Spader is, Dwayne Powers. So it's a very intense ending to a very intense mystery, and I loved it. I love when the games have that intense ending. It's just so fun. And then can we talk about the most epic ending to a Nancy Drew game? But Ralph Gardino, security guard, he deserves a hand because he comes in and tackles Dwayne to the ground, and it's the most amazing thing I've ever seen. So I took down some of the funnier quotes from this game that I kind of liked. So here are my favorites. So this quote belongs to Rick Arlen, but on that interview tape that Hannah sends us, he says, "Only my hairdresser knows for sure." There was also a funny bit of dialogue where Rick says, "Maddie hangs on to Dwayne like my Aunt Mimi hangs on to cats and old newspapers." And of course, I will always love Millie Strathorn saying, "It's open!" So as far as some of the best and worst puzzles goes and Stay Tuned for Danger, I really liked the puzzle that we had to solve to get into the sound booth. I liked the clock puzzle on the set of Light of Our Love, and even though it was kind of stressful, I liked the bomb puzzle. The puzzle that I didn't like actually was the door puzzle at the very end. So Dwayne locks Nancy and Lillian on the set, and you have to do this time puzzle where you're getting all these buttons to stay down, but it seems like an easy puzzle, but when you're stressed and you hear Lillian screaming in the background for her life, it's super stressful. Okay, so now we're going to talk about one of my favorite aspects of the Nancy Drew games, which is the music and the soundtracks. I really like the music from Stay Tuned for Danger, so I gave it a rating of 3 magnifying glasses. It's very, I feel like Secrets Can Kill, it was very disjointed and all over the place. I feel like this was the soundtrack that really got it right for the first time. So now, for your listening pleasure, I'm going to play some of the tracks from this game. This first one is called Maddie, and this is the music we hear at her apartment during the day. It's so calming. It's almost as calming as the lobby music at the studio. It does take a creepy turn, though, later in the song, like right about here. And then Kevin Manthe, the guy who composed this music, because he's so fantastic, he even gave us a version for nighttime at Maddie's apartment. And this next track is called just Exit, and it's when you leave Maddie's apartment during the day, but it sounds so New York to me. And then we get some fun exit music for nighttime when we're leaving Maddie's apartment. And then just the main theme for Stay Tuned for Danger. It's just such a great and cohesive soundtrack. It really pulls together the whole entire game, and I feel like the really intense moments are just brought to a head even more with this music. So I gave it 3 magnifying glasses. There's soundtracks that I like better, but this one is still really top-notch. And as far as an overall magnifying glass rating for Stay Tuned for Danger as a whole, I gave it 4 magnifying glasses because it's such a good game. I know that it's an older game and it is glitchy and it's hard to get it to work on any kind of modern day computers, but it's just such a good story, and I love that they pulled from the Nancy Drew files to make this game. So yeah, that concludes this 40th episode of the podcast. Wow. And this episode on Stay Tuned for Danger. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and the next game episode that we'll be doing further down the line will be Message in a Haunted Mansion, but next week's episode is going to be about The Secret of the Golden Pavilion. So if you like luau's and hula dancing ghosts, then you won't want to miss this one. I think I'll play this one out with one of my favorite tracks from Stay Tuned for Danger. Until next time. Thank you for listening to this episode of True Drew Podcast. If you'd like to stay up to date on the latest information and new episodes, our Instagram is True Drew Podcast. Or for general inquiries, you can email us at truedrewpodcast@gmail.com.